Okay, in this video we're going to go over the inference and extension question type. So in terms of basic information for the inference extension questions, these questions appear frequently, often more than once per passage, and range from general to specific, though they tend to be more on the general side. And this question has several different wording variations. For example, we have here in our question says, it can be inferred from the passage that early folklorists assumed that which one of the following was true. Or, it can be inferred from the passage that the author would most likely agree with which one of the following statements. Or, which one of the following can be most reasonably inferred from the passage. Or, the passage most clearly suggests that the author believes which one of the following. Or, with which one of the following statements would the author most probably agree. Or, according to information in the passage, a widow in early 13th century England could control more land than did her eldest son if, and then answer choices. So you need to look for inferred or suggests, but you need to be careful since other question types use those terms, particularly inferred. Likewise, an inference question may simply ask what the title of a passage may be, or a sentence that could be added. And these are the extension types, the extension variation. And the correct choice best states what is most likely true or has to be true. Okay, inference questions test your comprehension and ability to make connections and see what has to be true. So you're not tested on your memory, so you won't be hunting through the text for the answer. These questions are quite similar to the inference and must-be true questions in the argument section. The main difference is that, of course, you're not always going to be dealing with such a short segment. As in the argument section, you're basically looking for an assumption or implication of a piece of information in the passage, or a combination of several pieces of information. More specific questions will deal with a narrower range of sentences, while the more general questions can include the entire passage and will ask for broad generalizations. And it's also called extension because for some variants, you're asked to extend the reasoning or information from a passage. And that's what I mentioned, that the answer choice will be a sentence that could be added to the passage or a title. Now, in terms of our approach, it's important to analyze the answer choices. So depending on whether the question is more general or more specific, you'll be dealing with more information. For questions that are more general, it's impractical to analyze the entire passage, so analyzing the choices is even more important. So first, determine the scope of the question. Is it more specific or more general? If it's specific, then determine which part of the passage you need to restrict your attention to and determine what it's talking about. If it's general, then keep in mind the paragraph summaries that you've been coming up with and the main point. The question may introduce an element that you think leads to a particular part of the passage, but be careful since one of the ways that the test makers trick you is by causing you to concentrate on an irrelevant part of the passage. Then, move on to the answer choices and evaluate them by eliminating the ones that don't have to be true. So whether you're dealing with more specific or more general questions, as in the argument section, the choices that add information that don't have to be true, that are contrary to information in the passage, or that deal with subtle shift in the terms are incorrect. You can negate the choices and look to see if there's a contradiction with anything in the passage. If there's a contradiction, then that's the correct choice, and if there's no contradiction, then it's incorrect. In terms of the right answers and wrong answers, the correct choice will provide information that has to be true given the information in the passage. So an inference will generally take the form of a synthesis or combination of different pieces of information from a passage, a restatement of a piece of information, or a consequence or necessary condition of a piece of information. Something that has to be true can't be falsified, so when you take the negative of an inference, there will be a contradiction with some piece of information in the passage. And no essential difference between the more specific and the more general pieces of information. The more general questions take more time because you have to look at more information, whereas for specific questions, you're restricted to a smaller area. The incorrect answers will not provide information that has to be true. So any new information means that the choice is incorrect since the new information doesn't correspond to anything in the passage and there's no way of knowing if it has to be true. So pay attention to the shifts in terms. The choices that could be true instead of having to be true are also wrong. So pay attention to quantifier adjectives such as many, some, most, etc. There will also be opposite choices, information that can't be true. And something that doesn't have to be true can be falsified. So when you take the negative of choice, there won't be a contradiction with any piece of information in the passage. And once again, there's no essential difference between the more specific and the more general questions. So the basic approach to doing these questions is to have a good idea of whether the question is asking you to look at a specific area of the passage or the passage in general, and then to spend time evaluating the choices to see which one has to be true.